All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the latest class in our series on Pirkei Avot. We're wrapping up this series, and we're also wrapping up, over 2 years of online classes. So with that in mind, the focus of these last few sessions is going to be, I think, on ways that Pirkei Avot teaches us to take our own development and the mission and the movement and the motion of what it means to be stewarding a life and to put it in our hands. So today's session is going to be focused on two four-partite Mishnayot in dialogue with each other, and one of which has like a very striking and even infamous phrase, and we're gonna dig into it. So we're gonna see the rabbis try to hash out, quote unquote, what are 4 ways for a person to be? And not just a person to be, but how do you relate to that which you have? And I think that question opens up kind of a fundamental relationship between who and what you are and what it is that you have, or what it is that you see that is proper to you. Like what's in the ambit of your concern. We actually touched on this last week, although this is just for the in-person people because the recording has been lost into the winds of time. But the word in Hebrew for reshut, which means permission, is also the same, which also means like agency, is the same as the word for domain, or what is in your property. All right, so it's interesting that like when you think of your agency, it is that which you have an active relationship to, and that which you have some kind of involvement with, and even perhaps control over, or at least the right to intervene with. So who you are, what you are, is in some way tied to that which you can have an effect on. Right? That which you can have an impact on. These two things maybe aren't so different. Maybe the self, in a way, is kind of a modern idea, but a more ancient Torah idea might be really self as agency, right? Self as the circle around you in which you can act. You are made of what you can do more than what you are, in a way. So we're going to look at who and what we are is fundamentally tied to, connected to, even maybe constituted by that which we relate to and that which we can have an effect on. So let's get cracking. Great. Okay, so can everyone see that okay? Fabulous. So,
yes.
Great. So this class, what is the ambit of my concern? Ambit, again, think of the word reshut, right? Like the fence around your quote-unquote property. And the subheading is laissez-faire, the ethic of Sodom, right? So we'll get to that in a minute. That'll make sense soon. But laissez-faire, right, the French phrase that means like effectively live and let live, right? Like to withdraw your involvement from something. So let's start with, we're going to go backwards. We're going to look at a later Mishnah first and then zoom back 3 Mishnayos. So can we get a brave volunteer to read either in Hebrew or in English? Susie.
I can volunteer.
No, Susie's going to do it.
Oh, go for it, Susie.
Oh, you can do it in English. Or in Hebrew. Whatever you want.
All right, it has to be in English. Sorry, can you guys hear me? Because the room I'm in is really echoey, so people usually say it's hard to hear me.
Sounds very weighty. It's got a lot of gravitas.
Okay. There are 4 types of charity givers. He who wishes to give, but that others should not give. His eye is evil to that which belongs to others. He who wishes that others should give, but that he himself should not give. His eye is evil towards that which is his own. He who desires that he himself should give, and that others should give, he is a pious man. He who desires that he himself should not give, and that others too should not give, he is a wicked man.
Okay. So if you were just to kind of like sum up this heuristic, what do you think is the thrust of this teaching?
that not all giving is necessarily good.
Okay, interesting. So what's the case in which you're giving but it's not good? In which giving is happening but it's not good?
Well, if you're like sort of forcing to give or feel like you have to give, or it's not, and it's not reciprocal, it's not like community based.
Okay, good. So yeah, the two first types of person are, when it says the I is evil or I is wicked, it's what's called the Einahora, or the Kanahora. And the idea there might seem to imply some kind of casting aspersions on, right? So if somebody let's look at the first person. The first person, right, is somebody who, one person who wants to be giving charity but wants other people not to. Why? Why do you think that person would have that perspective or that position?
It's selfish, like they're trying to look better than everyone else.
Great. Yeah, exactly. They want the glory. They want the attention. They want the reputation. And if they want someone else to give but not them, why?
He's a schnorrer. He wants other people to give, but he doesn't think he should give.
Right. He's outsourcing his ethical responsibilities, right? And this is interesting too, right? Because often you'll hear about Judaism like that. Oh, charity is a Christian idea, and the real point of tzedakah is that, that the action happens, that the money is given, and anything else doesn't really matter. And ultimately that's true because tzedakah is a mitzvah. But here we have something a little bit more contentful, something a little more substantive in Pirkei Avot. It does matter, both of those, let's say, have equal amounts of giving. Protagonist gives X, their neighbor gives 0, or neighbor gives X and protagonist gives 0, right? The same amount being given. But it seems what matters is your position to the giving, right? If you see it as being something that either redounds to you particularly, right? Like you get the glory, you get the goods, or you benefit from riding on someone else's coattails, right? Then it seems like in some way the act of giving has been tarnished, undermined, right? And then all the more so, right? We see obviously though the wicked example is somebody who holds on to their own wealth, white knuckles it, and also in some way intervenes and tries to keep other people from being generous as well, right? They want no one to be giving. And that's very interesting because I want us to remember that idea, that the wicked principle is that everything stays in its place. It's better, it's funny, you might think like, oh, the bad guy or whatever, right, is somebody who doesn't give and wants other people to give. You'd think maybe that person would be the worst, right? Because they're abdicating their own responsibility and they're taking advantage of other people. But the nadir of this, according to this Mishnah, the wicked example, right, is somebody who is preventing giving from happening, period, and maintaining a type of status quo, right, where everything stays in its place. And the righteous person, right, the pious person, and I think the word pious is important here because we'll look at later this notion of midat chasidut, right, the character of piety. But the pious person is somebody who not just gives, but also wants other people to give. Now, does that mean they actively encourage, that they go around knocking on people's door with a tzedakah box and going, give a little to this worthy cause? Maybe. Or maybe it's just kind of more of an existential orientation, right, in which your position in the world is that you want things to be flowing. You see your money as being at others' disposal to be used for the well-being of others, and also in a way that's how you relate to property in general, that everyone's wealth is supposed to be circulating, being redistributed. Not to put too fine a point on it. But I want us to kind of pay attention that we have this dialectic, right, this balance between, this tension between the act of giving happening, i.e. wealth being in some way redistributed to those who need it. But on the other hand, the Mishnah doesn't forget your position to that act of giving, right, your relationship to it. Whether you're encouraging it, you're even catalyzing it, or you're in some way gumming up the works, either in yourself or in your relationship to other people. Okay? So now we're going to zoom back 3 Mishnayot and look at a more broad kind of ethical question. Not just what are 4 ways to give, but more to the point, or maybe a more general question of there are 4 different ways to be. 4 midot, right? 4 measures of a person. But I prefer to translate midah as character, like i.e., to build your character, to construct your character, to work on your character. I don't know if I believe in human nature per se, although that phrase will come in later. But character, right? How you fashion yourself, how you make yourself, who you are in actu, right? As an active individual. So arba midot ba'adam. Okay, there are 4 characters that are found in human beings. Someone want to read this one? It can be in Hebrew or English, equally. No preference.
I love that in Hebrew. The Hebrew's
Great.
so cool here. Okay.
Okay, let's hear it.
Arba midot ba'adam. Ha'omer shali shali v'shacha shacha. Zomida benonit. V'yeshamrim zomidot storm. Shali shacha, v'shachat shali am haaretz. Shali shacha, v'shachat shacha chasid. Shali shali, v'shachat shali rasha.
Okay, great. So it throws you a curveball immediately. We'll get to this one in a second, right? It's like, it's either the medium, right? It's just like right down the middle character trait, midah benonit, or it's literally the worst people who ever existed. One of the two. But let's go to let's go to the tape first. Let's go to the easy answers. Okay. So why do you think? I mean, the Chassid and the Russia, right? Like the two extremes of the. You'd think they would be the extremes, right? But let's go to the obvious one. So why is the Chassid somebody who says what's mine is yours and what's yours is yours?
That's someone who's not wanting to take from anyone else, but is willing to give to the others. So he's saying, what's yours is yours. You can have it, but if you need, what's mine is yours. That's a true tzaddik.
Okay, very interesting. What's funny is if you look at it just on the face of it, it could be the case that it's the same trait as the person who is wicked in the other one, in the sense that it says, what's mine is yours. Sorry, not someone who's wicked, someone rather who is who's casting aspersions on other people's stuff. Right? It says, what's mine is yours, and what's yours is yours, i.e., I'll give to you, and you should hold on to your stuff. Now, I think you're right. That's not what it's describing, but it's interesting that something that looks like it on the face of it, right, ends up being something totally different because of how you relate to it. Right? The chassid here is clearly saying, yeah, I think exactly like you said, Lauren, like, what I have is at your disposal, and what you have, I'm not going to intrude on. Right? I'm not going to try to take advantage of you in some way. And we'll see how that comes back later when we get back to the chassid after we go through our journey through the city of Sodom. But it's not the case, right, that he's trying to stop giving from happening, because I don't think it's implying that he would prohibit or preclude somebody from giving tzedakah, but rather that they are trying to have as little of an impact on other people's resources as possible, or they're trying not to impinge on anybody. Okay, and the Russia is somebody who says, what's mine is mine, and what's yours is mine. Why is that like the Russia? Shali shalcha,
He thinks
shali
everything.
shalcha shali.
He thinks everything belongs to him. He's glad to take your stuff, and he wouldn't give a dime no matter how poor the person is. He truly is a Russia.
Yeah, an egotist, right? All this person is appetite, right? What's mine is mine. Don't you dare come knocking on my door. And also, what's yours is mine. I'm going to find any opportunity I have to take it from you, because I think it belongs to me, right? So when I said like the reshut, right, the ambit of who you are, of what belongs to you, of what is proper to you, right? The egotist, the Russia, thinks that the whole world is theirs, right? There's no end to the limit. of this person's reshut, right? Whereas with the chassid, the chassid's reshut, also in a way, ironically, is also infinite, but in an inverted way, right? It's not that they think everything belongs to them, but rather actually what they have belongs to everybody, right? They are at the world's disposal. That is the tzaddik, right? That is like the lamed vavnik, the secret tzaddik who helps keep the world going. Now we're going to look at the two kind of ambiguous cases. Okay, so shali shalcha v'shalcha shali. That's an amaratzis, right? That's somebody who is an amaretz is like is a rabbinic term for an ignorant person. Why do you think that that's the way the Mishnah describes somebody who says, yeah, listen, what's mine is yours. Also, what's yours is mine. Like, how do you relate to that positionality? It's kind of baffling, right? Because it seems like this person doesn't understand, I don't know, the basic like tenet of property, right? Like what's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours. That seems very inefficient in the way that that's being organized. But interestingly, right? I mean, like, and you can say that, right? That like an amarat, this person an amaretz because it's an ignorant person because they don't understand the way the world works, right? Like, there has to be a sense of what's mine and what's not mine, what's yours and what's not yours, and that's the way that we have a certain kind of, there are boundaries that help maintain society. But on the other hand, yeah, interesting. So Susie is saying, in a way, this is actually a very communitarian person because it's very sharing, right? What's yours is mine, i.e., and what's mine is yours because we are mutually imbricated in each other. We are mutually involved with each other. We're reciprocal, right? So like we're throwing in together. To each according to what they need, from each according to what they have. All right? So, and it's very interestingly, the Rabbeinu Yonah, the Barton Nura and the Rabbeinu Yonah both have interesting kind of like, maybe counterintuitive readings of this. So, Rabbeinu Yonah says, the Barton Nura, Ovadia Barton Nura, kind of the Rashi of the Mishnah. He writes the most prominent, one of the most prominent Mishnah commentaries. It's always printed in the printed edition of the Mishnah. It's like the same place that Rashi has in the Talmud. So it says, this is a person who benefits from and provides in equal measure. Okay? And this is for the sake of settling the land. Now, he might think literally in the sense of settling the land of Israel, or he might mean, I think maybe exactly what Susie was intuiting, this is, in a way, a fundamental aspect of what it means to have society. That to white-knuckle your own property is already fundamentally perhaps problematic. Right, to see property, on one hand, is the Amaretz someone who's, like unfit for society because they don't understand the basic rule of society, which is property, something can belong to somebody, or ironically, are they Amaretz, literally a person of the land, like i.e., a society person, a community person, right? I.e., everything I have is for the sake of society. And everything society has is for the sake of its residents, right? Its participants, including me. But he doesn't know the law, right? He doesn't know the Torah. He's not a book learning guy. Visoneh matanot yichyeh, right? It says in Mishlei, in Proverbs, that you thrive if you actually hate gifts. We'll get back to this idea later, right? That like being self-sufficient is ideal. Like the chassid, right? The chassid is staying away from ever having to go on the dole because they don't want to inconvenience anybody else. But interestingly, maybe the neutral position, you'd think maybe the neutral position, the midah beinonit, right? The mediating position, middle position, is what's mine is mine, and what yours is yours. Everything stays the same. But no, interestingly, the neutral position, the starting position, not ideal, because ideally you wouldn't have to inconvenience anybody. But the starting position is, what's yours is mine, i.e., sometimes I am vulnerable, I need help. And what's mine is yours. Because when I'm able to help you, of course I will, because that's my basic societal function. That's my social duty. Right, the Havamina, you might have thought that the starting position is that everything stays in the boundaries of property. But Bartanura is pushing back and saying, no, the basic starting position is we live in a society, right? That what I have is for social use. There's a sense of the public. The private serves the public. And also, so that the public can serve the private, right? So that the public, the social, the society can support and sustain those who live in it. V'zeu l'shon am ha'aretz. That's why it's called am ha'aretz, a person of the, a community of the earth. Ha'amur b'chol makom, right? This is in every place. Sherotzeh b'tikuna shel ha'aretz. That what they desire is the completion, the wholeness, the sustainability of the land, i.e. of society. Aval ein bo chochma lahavdil b'tikunin haru'uyim. But they're not able to advance, per se, because they don't have that kind of more refined sensibility. So the starting position for the Bartanura is to be a person of the earth, i.e., one of the larger social body. Rabbeinu Yonah pushes it, I think, a little bit further. He says, actually, tikun ha'olam, right? It's not just tikun ha'aretz. It's not just making sure that the land is settled, but rather that the world is taken care of. That's why they're called Am Ha'aretz. This is such an out of left field answer, but it's such a creative answer because there's such an established tradition in rabbinic literature that Am Ha'aretz, right? These are dummies. These are rubes. These are hoi polloi, right? Like the fools, the ignoramuses. But no, says Rabbeinu Yonah, Am Ha'aretz because they want tikkun ha'olam. They want the world. They want society to be stable and sustainable. Sherotza likach v'litain, because they want to make sure that people can give and take in equal measure, right? When they need, they take, and when they can, they give. Bazeh ava binehem. And if that's the case, if everyone is giving and everyone is taking, that is a pro-social position, because that generates love between us. The curveball here is we're starting to see, by contrast, without even getting into it, what the problem is with the status quo position of either Benoni/Sodom. This position in which everyone has property, yes, but nobody is holding on to it, grasping at it desperately, because they understand that property exists to make sure that everyone can be taken care of. And it gets distributed according to need and according to your ability. When you're able to, you provide, and when you need to, you take. And that builds love between people. Why? Because it's a society and a relationality, right? It's a way of relating to each other, in which the presumption is that we are ready. We are revved up and ready to go to help each other. And I feel encouraged and safe and secure in going to my neighbor and saying, I need help. Right? No castle doctrine, no standard ground rule here. If you knock on somebody's door, the correct thing to do is to open it and to say, hi, who are you? What do you need? This is what's called Torat HaRegel, the Torah of the foot. It is a fundamental rule in nomadic societies that if you are a visitor and then there is a principle that still exists in lots of desert societies that when you are hosted, you are taken care of. Why? Because everyone might be in that position in which you're moving around and you don't have as many provisions as you ideally need. So they build a system of reciprocal care. That you are hosted and you are cared for and you are taken care of. So Rabbeinu Yonah takes the Bartanura position, although he's actually early, I think he's actually older than him, but regardless. He takes Rabbeinu Yonah, the Bartanura position, says, no, it's not just that this is a midah tova l'tikkun olam. It's fine. It's lo mechochma. It's not like from smarty pantsness. It's not from an intellect, reason. It's intuitive. It's guts. This is like the guts. This is the way we intuitively should be with each other. Not a way we need to reason ourselves into believing. This has to be the starting point of what it means to be alive as a human being in society. Right, fine. Yes, Mishlei, proverb says, don't take gifts because then you'll thrive. Fine, that's true. But where we start from, where our gut starts from, is that we are fundamentally vulnerable. We all have needs, and we are all here to make sure that each other are taken care of. Because sometimes you might be in need. Okay, before we shift to Sodom, any just thoughts about Amaratzis? The quote-unquote ignorant position? All right, well, keep it simmering, because I want you to remember what Bartenura and Rebbeinu Yonah, how they just described it, and what it does and what it means, because it might come back in a surprising way. But now let's look at Sodom. So let's just go back and say, Shali shali v'shelcha shelcha zehu midat benonit, and some o yomar zehu midat Sodom. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours. Right? That's laissez-faire. Right? Laissez-faire means I raise up my hands, open palms. I am not holding you. I'm not intervening. I'm not involving myself. I just let it ride. Okay? What's yours is yours. What's mine is mine. Back off. Okay? So some people say that's the middle ground. That's the starting position. That's the neutral position. Right? I have stuff, you have stuff, and then everything else we decide from there. Right? That's like, in a sense, that's the, that we can see that model as the, as the, let's say, the foundational principle of a capitalistic model, right? I have property, you have property, and then we intentionally decide to enter into some kind of contractual relationship with each other, right? I hire you to mow my lawn, I give you money which can be used for goods and services, right? But other people say that this is actually Midat Sodom, that this is how the society of Sodom functioned, which is the opposite of what's the neutral position, because they were literally firebombed by God. So we can presume it was a bad society. I mean, it was so bad, right? Famously, Avram Avinu couldn't even find 10 righteous people to redeem it. Right? It was top to bottom, real schmucks. So, why is this the way that Sodom functioned? Well, let's look at an early rabbinic source in the Tosefta. This is from the Lieberman edition of the Tosefta, from Masechta Sota, in which is an early version of this text. Anshe Sodom lo nitga'u lifnei hamakom ela mitoch hatova sheshbi'a lahem. The people of Sodom only became proud before God because of the goodness that God bestowed upon them. Shenamar eretz mimena yatsa lechem makom sapir avaneha nativ lo yidao ait lo hadrichu da da da. It's like a bunch of kind of phrases from this verse from Job. Out of the earth comes bread, a place of sapphire stones, a path not known to eagle's eye, i.e. some treasured, tucked away place, untrodden by the hooves of beasts. Some kind of, verdant, lush paradise city. And we know it refers to Sodom because it's not obvious, but a few verses down it says, and this place was turned upside down. It's like, says the rabbis, what place was turned upside down? Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay. It was totally just destroyed, completely upset. Okay. So what two things are tied to each other in this early kernel of a tradition about how real bad Sodom was? What are the two principles that are tied to each other? What character trait does the Tosefta assign to Sodom? It doesn't say they're selfish. Well, it doesn't say they're selfish.
Well, it says in a sense they're only proud. It's not that they respected God for being God. They respected God for the good that was done for them. Good. So it was it's a selfish idea. If it's good for me, it's good. That's it.
Yeah, I think that's where it's going for sure. But I want to start with just what it's describing first. But then you're absolutely right. That's the tack it's going to take. Pride is what they ascribe to Sodom, ge'ah, ga'ava, right? Nitga'u, right? They only became proud. Proud, not not Jewish pride, but proud in the sense of haughty, right? Prideful. When they were given a gift by God, i.e. this immensely, luxurious, lush city, this territory that they lived on. Their relationship to it was one that instilled pride in them rather than, like Lauren was saying, gratitude, generosity, right? They saw it as something that was bestowed on them, and thus they were deserving of it. Now we fill in the gaps, not others, right? But they were given a gift, and that fills them up. What's mine is mine, right? And what's yours is yours, i.e., what you have, that's how God wants to relate to you. God likes us. Look at this great city we have around us. How's your city? Oh, it's not so good? It's a real bummer. I'm sorry that happened. Right? Right? Sympathy is not always so nice. Like, oh man, that must be so hard to not have a great city like this. So that's like the kernel of this idea. Now we're going to get into the way that the rabbis dig into it. So let's look at another biblical intertext besides the one from Job. We have from Ezekiel. This one he's literally describing Sodom. He says, Hine ze haya avon Sodom. This is the sin of Sodom. Achotech gaon, right? Your sister is gaon, again, same word, ga'ava, right? Arrogant, proud. Sivat lechem shalavat hashket, like saturated with bread, right? And peaceful, undisturbed, tranquil, right? It's like it's a paradise. It's an oasis. Hayallah. V'livnotea v'yad ani ve'evyon lo echzika. So tranquility, peace, well-being, that Sodom had, and its inhabitants. But it did not support the hand of the poor and the needy. Okay, so now we get the second half of it. Sodom had everything going in its favor, right? Super saturated with sustenance. But did not see then that gift as then being one that charged them with the responsibility or the mission of distributing that to make sure that others were taken care of. Rather, lehefech, the opposite. It's poor and needy, which existed there. You'd think, richest city in the world, let's say. The most tranquil, secure, right? We're going to see how that's going to get picked up on later. City in the world. And yet, it didn't see that security, that tranquility, or that resource richness to then be a license to try to make sure that those goods were distributed to all. Right? Kind of reminds you, like a common rhetorical hook that is used by Bernie Sanders in America, and he will often say, in the richest society in human history, how is it the case that, right? And then he just lists, fill in the blank here, right? Increasing maternal mortality, right? How is it the case, right? In the richest society in all of human history, more and more like women are dying in childbirth. That seems absurd, right? That seems tragic, and just it boggles the mind. Not securing healthcare for those who live there, right? So the city of Sodom had everything going for it: security and resources, and yet not only dropped the ball when it came to taking care of its residents, those who weren't as fortunate, but even, it seems, furthered that problem, deepened those problems, refused to support those in need. So let's go to the Gemara. And the Gemara has a lot, on page 109a and 109b, folio 109a, 109b, in the Tractate of Sanhedrin. It's in the tractate called Pirkei Avot, which is like one of the rare times the Talmud does theology. And the theological question in Pirkei Avot is, who gets to go to heaven, right? Who gets to go to the world to come? And one of the famous categories of classes of people who don't get to go to the world to come are the residents of Sodom. Got it in one, exactly. So, why don't they get to go there? Well, again, they were, the paradigm of being a real nasty piece of work. But let's see examples of why is it that they were so bad. right? So we're going to see this seed that's sown from the Tosefta gets watered and grows into a very gnarled and twisted oak. Okay? So, it's the people of Sodom said, since we live in a land, that just produces bumper crops of grain and wheat and bread, and has the dust of gold, right? Like, think of like the way, the streets are paved with cheese, right? Golden in Medina, right? America, or Canada too, I guess. It's the golden land, the streets are paved with gold, or an American tale, right? It says the streets are paved with cheese. That's my primary reference. That's my canon. Right? We have everything we need. It's, so why do we need travelers? Right? Why do we need Ovrei Derachim? Remember Torah Regel, the Torah of the foot? Torah of the traveler? Take care of those who need help when they come through your town. She'ein ba'im aleinu elo l'chasreinu. Because all these travelers are coming. There are no right, exactly, Lauren. There are no cats in America. There are no cats in Sodom. Get out of here, cats, right? No, but not just that. I mean, the parallel is kind of obvious here, right? Like, when I said the castle doctrine earlier, that's a legal principle in certain states in America, right? That if somebody infringes on your property, then you actually have the right to you have the right to use lethal force to defend your property. Or they're also called the standard ground rule. Well, they're slightly different doctrines, but they're very similar. But not just that, actually, there's, if you pay attention, I actually gave a speech about this at Beth Lida near the beginning of my term there for the Holocaust Education Week, about the connections between Nazism and the Holocaust and an increasing ideology of what's called eco-fascism. Namely, that sees the impending threat of climate change as a reason to lock down and to build the walls, keep people out, especially when there's going to be increased migration because of climate-based change, right? 50 degrees Celsius in Pakistan and India, people are going to move, right? Where are they going to go? And then the question is, we're under threat, right? So there's this notion, you'll see this phrase show up a lot, the word fortress. You have to keep your eye out because this is a growing movement that is deeply, deeply, not just suspicious, but phobic and hateful of migrants and immigrants and refugees. But you have to watch out for, we're seeing these movements grow in many, many, many societies, and here as well. But you have to watch out for the word fortress. It shows up Fortress America. You'll see a lot in the nativist movements, the eco-fascists. Fortress America. You have to lock down the battlements, keep them out, right? The hordes of the unwashed and all these terribly xenophobic ways of putting it. But this is Sodom. We have it good here. The streets are paved with gold. Anyone coming to visit, anyone moving here, anyone seeking refuge here, they're only coming to hurt us. They're only coming to take away from us, take our jobs. Right? It's literally there. Like I'm not shoving politics into this. Sodom is a fundamentally political category. And it's a political category that sees its security as being posed against the well-being of others. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours. It says, Bo v'nishkach Torah regel. Let's forget the Torah of the visitor, in which you're supposed to do whatever you can, effectively, to make sure that they're taken care of. Okay. So that is where this is going. Let's look at this. Let's look at this. There's more examples of Sodom than we can get into tonight. But as always, I'll share the source sheet. You have more to look at. Let's look at what Rava says. Rava's taught. What is the meaning of this verse? In the dark they dig through houses, by day they shut themselves up, they know not light. Okay, so it's worth knowing, digging through houses, that's a verse that also shows up earlier in Sanhedrin, in the example in which you are allowed to use lethal force if somebody is trying to break into your house at night. Why? Because there is a reasonable idea that they might be trying to hurt you or even kill you to get your stuff. Now, if they're trying to break into your house in the daytime, you don't have that license to kill, because it's not as reasonable to presume that they're going to use lethal force against you. It's only in the nighttime because because the risk is too high, and halacha thinks that it is reasonable for you to defend yourself if you need to in that kind of way. So it's worth having that in mind. It says, this teaches that they would set their sights on property owners. The people of Sodom would set their sights on property owners. They would take one of them and they would give them balsam, right, whose smell diffuses through, right, because balsam, it's like incense, right, it's like one of those diffusing sprayer things. And the property owner would place it in his treasury. So go around, we're from the Better Business Bureau, we're from the home, the neighborhood association. We want to give you a present. Here is a nice thing, a nice little tchotchke. Why don't you put it somewhere nice, maybe where all your nice things are? So they put it where all their nice things are because this person is stupid. And then the people of Sodom would come around and they would sniff it out like a dog. And then they would discover where that person's stuff is. And it says they return in the evening, they howl like a dog and go around the city. So what do? After discovering the location, they would come and dig there and they would take that property. So who of the different relations to property would you say this person is? Is this sheli, sheli, shelcha, shelcha, or is this sheli, sheli, v'shelcha, sheli? Is this what's mine is mine, what's yours is mine, or what's yours is yours, what's mine is mine?
This is the latter. This is a guy who's saying, I'll take your stuff, you don't deserve it, and mine is mine. Which is what I didn't think
this seems to be This seems to be the Russia. Right? This seems to be the Russia. Right? So it seems like the Talmud might be deviating from the Mishnah. The Tosefta and the first thing in the Talmud we saw seem to jibe more with the Mishnah. What's mine is mine. We have all this great stuff that God gave us, and what's yours is yours. I'm just not going to help you. Unless maybe you see that they have a right to it because of the laws of tzedakah and meiser and things like that. And in that case, maybe you're depriving them of what they have a right to. So maybe that's the case. But clearly, though, in these two sections of Talmud, the one we skipped in this one, it shows that Sodom is Russia, right? It's literally rishus. It's what's mine is mine, and also I'm going to steal from you. I'm going to disrespect your property boundaries, and I'm going to literally take your stuff. So I think, in a way, the Talmud, it wants to really, turn Sodom into a caricature of evil. And how do they do that? Well, by saying, they're literally exactly how the Mishnah describes evil people to be. They take other people's stuff. They hold on to what's theirs and they take other people's stuff. But I think we actually lose that it starts with the seed. It's actually a process, not a state of being. You start by saying, what's mine, mine, and what's yours is yours. And then you end up saying, what's mine is mine, and what yours is mine. Because once you have a sense of us being fundamentally divided one from another, then why not just move on from leaving you be? Eventually, you start to see the other person as an untapped resource. You find yourself having an entitlement to their things. I think in a way, laissez-faire always ends up becoming predatory. There's never a way when you perceive the rubber hitting the road or the poop hitting the fan, the non-violence principle of what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, I will not interfere with you, that ends up crumbling pretty quickly. Fortress. Keep them out. I need my things. I need to shore myself up so that I'm secure. Everyone else's well-being is actually ultimately serving mine. But I want to see if we can actually prove this the way that the principle of Sodom works. So let's go back to commentaries on the Mishnah. Okay? So the Yachin, later commentary, 19th century, says this. Those who say this is a midah of Sodom, mine, mine, yours, yours, in a way, it's kind of like the Amma Aretz. I compare myself to you. We're on equal terms. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours. We're this again. It's like it's the theoretical utopian capitalist ideal, right? Like we're equal here. We're equal bargaining partners. We're equal in the sense that we're both property owners. Like it says, love your neighbor as yourself. Right? Yours is yours. God bless you. I hope you're well. But that sees emotion, love, as just being a feeling. Right? It's just an emotion. Love, though, isn't an emotion. It's an orientation. It's an existential practice. Love isn't just a feeling of, yeah, I wish you well. It's something that just exists in my head and my heart. Love is a practice. It's a commitment to somebody else's well-being. So, al kol panim idei hisnagus shelo, right, by this way that you habituate yourself, this habit that you have, tisbatel ha'ava shebein adam l'chavero. Love cannot stay alive. It can't be sustained if your fundamental principle is that I leave you alone and you leave me alone. Because love is not leaving each other alone. It's making sure that we see each other as fundamentally constitutively connected. Like the Am Haaretz. That we're fundamentally tied to each other. We constitute each other. Before us as individuals, there's society that holds us. Even so, the principle is, I love you by saying I leave you alone. I'm just not going to bother you. I'm going to let you live your own life. That's like the laissez-faire ideal. But the Achin says there's no way for love to survive because love is made of involving ourselves with each other. Right? The pushy Jew, right, is our cultural inheritance. Because we know that we are not, in a way, individuals in some deep way. There's something that connects us before we're individuals. I don't have a right to leave you alone, says the Achin. Kib is Sodom, like in Sodom, he says. Shemanu regel. So I think Shemina'o maybe regel orchim mibineam, right? They kept refugees, immigrants, migrants, visitors from them. Af shiadu, even though they knew that if they went to their country, they would be taken care of. In a way, it seems like the chassid. I'm not going to take your charity. I don't want to take any gifts. I don't want to inconvenience you. But the truth is, the way to live is that we all inconvenience each other. That's what it means to be alive. That's what it means to be in society. Society is based on learning to tolerate each other because we are fundamentally up in each other's business. I'm not saying that it gives you a license to bother each other, chas v'shalom, but rather the notion is that we are, the fantasy of us being in these bubbles, these unimpeachable bubbles, is not just like an idea, it's potentially deeply destructive because it convinces us or it dissuades us of the notion that we are fundamentally connected to each other, first and foremost. It says, V'yatsu me'ra el ra, and they extended, they grew, they evolved from one wickedness to another until finally they reached the telos, the end result, the tachlis of cruelty. Cruelty specifically to the poor. What started with just leaving property owners alone became eventually, I think that last Gemara we saw, stealing from other people, and then eventually becomes cruelty towards those who have nothing. Cruelty towards those who have nothing, i.e., what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. Think of how nasty that is to say to somebody who has nothing. Oh, we're equal. We all had a shot, I guess. But if we got just this one round, one go-around, then a shot doesn't matter if I don't have a chance. And for Anshe Sodom, in a sense, they have that one go-around because this is it for them, because they don't see, right? They don't get world to come. Why? Because they don't understand that we extend beyond ourselves. The nature of a human being is to transcend. Right? We saw that also last week. That's why we're actually, according to the Maharal, greater than angels, because unlike angels who are static, who just do what God wants, human beings grow. We go beyond ourselves. And that way we're like God, who fundamentally goes beyond. We touch and we draw on the infinite because we grow and change. We become something else. Midat Sdom is static. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours. We don't change, we don't grow, we don't come into contact with each other, we don't evolve with each other. No one touches me. I don't touch anybody. Bartanura also has a take on the Sdom. He says, Karova devar lavoli de midat Sdom. Right, this mine, mine, yours, yours. It's going to mean you're going to approach the notion of Sdom. Shemitokshu ragil b'chach, because if you become used to this, if it becomes the habitual way you behave. Afilu b'davar shechaveru nehanev hu eino chaser lo yirseh lahanod lechavero. Even if it's a case in which you won't want to ever help somebody else, even if it doesn't actually deprive you of anything. Right? Like, I don't know, even a hug with it. Or, oh, so you have so much money, it does not impact you at all. It does not impact you at all. Because you won't want to help your fellow because it just becomes distasteful to you, it seems. This was the temperament of Sdom. Shayumi kavnin lechalot haregel mineam, right? They wanted to, again, keep travelers, refugees, immigrants, migrants, but really what it means, regel, those who move between. It's me freezing. I hope you can still hear me. My internet connection is a bit unstable. I apologize. Can you hear me at all? Give me a thumbs if you can hear me. Really, that's frustrating.
You're breaking up. You're breaking up a bit.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
You're good right now.
All right, good. I'll switch to my phone maybe if next time this happens. Right, that they wanted to keep the regel from them, but the visitor, migrant, refugee, immigrant, the point really is, what's the foot do? The foot takes you from one place to another. Right, what they're really trying to keep from you is those who cross boundaries. Those who enter your city, those who enter your home, those who, in a way, actualize and activate the truth that property exists for the sake of others' well-being. My home exists so that a neighbor can sit on my couch. So that a traveler can sleep in my bed. That's why I have a bed. That's why I have a house. That's why I have food on the table. But Sdom doesn't see it that way. I have a house to keep other people's out of it. I have food to make sure no one else eats. What's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. Even though the land was so saturated with food, they lost nothing by giving to other people. I'm going to do this on the outside, but you can look at the text on the screen. It was so nasty that Plotit, who is the rabbinic Midrash, says that this is the daughter of Lot. All right, the daughter of Lot saw a poor person being brutalized on the street by the people of Sodom. She hadn't drunk the Kool-Aid yet, and she was so distraught by this that she went out and when she went out to get water, she brought her empty jug of water, right, which is what she would bring the water back in, but she put food in it. And on the way to the well, the cistern, she would take the food out and give it to the poor guy getting brutalized, and we can also presume she gave it to other poor people as well. The people at home find out, and they burn her. They put her to death. Right? They tie her to a stake. They're going to burn her to death, because that's what they do to people who break the law. Right? And their law is don't help other people, don't help the poor. If you violate the law of what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, you're done. She's tied to the stake. They're about to light the branches. They're about to kindle the kindling. She cries out, God, will you sentence me according to your judgment? Her cry ascends to God. God hears it. And God comes down to see, is what she's describing true? Is it really what she thinks it is? And he sees that it is. And that's why in the Pasuk, in Bereshit, it says that because her cry, God has come down to see and deems it worthy of punishment. Not their cry, but plotit. That's the midrash on this. Right? She did the crime, and she did the time. So we see that the fantasy of what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours is that it can just stay neutral. But we see that in a number of ways, it has to, in some way, eventuate into something worse. Already, it's making sure that those who have nothing stay having nothing. But also, it can evilly pervert and become even worse and intensely than in which it justifies or gives you license to take other people's to make sure that you're shoring up your own. You might actually end up becoming Russia. What's mine is mine, what's yours is mine. But even if not that, we see that there's a brutality that exists at the core of this putative neutral idea. Because the law is that you can't violate mine and mine, what's yours is yours. Such that even violence is used to enforce it. So the Malbim, commenting on the Ezekiel, draws on the Midrash, and he kind of picks it, he looks at it clause by clause. Malbim says this. Hineza ya avon Sodom achotech. This is the sin of Sodom, your sister. Ha'avon shaleim hayu ru'uyim la'onesh. Why were they deserving of punishment? Because of the mitzvahs bein adam l'chavero, because of interpersonal mitzvahs, how we're supposed to treat each other. Sheyad ani ve'evyon lo hechzika, since they did not support the hand of the needy and the poor. This was the specific, special, particular sin of Sodom, which me'aveb mezid be'etzah sichlo, which perverts, twists, corrupts the fundamental reasonable counsel, i.e., how we're supposed to be with each other. The intuition, and I think in a way, the Malbim is thinking of the Am Haaretz that we described above. That we are supposed to be fundamentally interconnected, taking care of each other. That we recognize at the core of a human condition is vulnerability, and because of that, it is reasonable and necessary that we take care of each other. Because sometimes it'll be you, and when it's not you, I'm back.
Left us hanging. And when it's not you?
If it's not you, then you're there to make sure it's not somebody else. Right? If you have what you can, then you must give. Because it might be you the next time. This was the sin of Sodom. Ki lo asuze mipnei adochak. And this is like the Malbim is really like kind of putting his thumb on the scale. He's saying, listen, you can imagine a situation in which they have, they're pressed for resources. It's a drought, it's a famine, whatever. And thus, but that's not the case. Gaon sivat lechem. No, they were like this, like sitting fat and happy, just stuffed full of bread. So it's not that they didn't have what to give. That's no excuse. You can imagine, like, if they literally, there's time of scarcity, fine. Then maybe it's the well's not going to fill as readily. Fine. But it seems, actually, in that case, you have to make sure that, we're going to see, like, oh, maybe is that then saying that time of scarcity, then it justifies being skint? So hold that in the back of your head. And it's not because they're being put to siege, right, that they have imports at the moment, right? They can't get more food. The supply chain is broken. And because of that, right, then the food isn't running as readily. Ki shavat hashkei hayallah, because it was a time of tranquility. Uvechol, and even though, right, remember, in a time of siege, what do? Think of like rations in the time of World War II in London. It's not that nobody eats, it's that everybody tightens their pants. You don't throw the poor to die, you make a bread line. Even in the case of scarcity, siege, drought, famine, whatever, right? Joseph made sure everyone ate. Right? In a time of scarcity, make sure everyone sacrificed. Everyone recognizes that the little that we have needs to go around. And with all this, though, they were super saturated with food. They were at peace. And yet they still refused to support the hand of the needy and the poor. That's a very interesting phrase. Because they had bad conventions, i.e. the principles that organized their society were fundamentally corrupt, and their laws were ones that didn't support life. Laws under which you could not live. Right? Law has to serve those who live in it, or else it is not law, but cruelty. Like we said before, the fundamental behavior in society is tolerance. To learn how to tolerate the existence of others. Neighborliness. Cohabitation. In the words of next to each other. And thus, our fates are there is no what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. If you recognize that we are fundamentally touching each other. The Yitzhari gets at this point, right? So, like, again, the putative neutrality of saying what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, doesn't work if you recognize that not everybody occupies the same position that you do. It said that they didn't support the poor and the needy, and yet also in the Mishnah it says what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. How would it make sense to say that to somebody who has nothing? It's absurd. So fine, like, let's even leave that aside, he says. Afilu hachi, hodianu ki, Misha eno merachem alavyonim eno mina yishuv. Says more than that. He says somebody who behaves this way to the poor, something's fundamentally wrong with them. Eno mina yishuv means like they're not settled. Something's wrong. Lefisha teva ha'adam yoreyu l'rachem al minai. Because it is human nature to have compassion for your fellow. Further, the world is full of many changes. Things change all the time. Nothing is stable in this world. And maybe your own context is going to change. The wheel of fate may turn, and you might end up needing help from somebody. What does that sound like? Midat ama aretz. Right? That we are fundamentally constitutively bound up in each other. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. That's what the Yitzhari. It's realistic. It's necessary to believe that, because you don't know what's going to happen, and you need to make sure that it's like John Rawls's theory of justice, right? It's what's it called? The prisoner's dilemma, I think, right? In which, right, two people, you don't know what the fate of the other person's going to be, so it is behind a veil of ignorance, that's the phrase he uses, that the society you would construct would be one that benefits everybody equally, because you don't know who it's going to impact. Right? The Yitzhari is saying, the world is changing all the time. To live in this fantasy of what's mine is mine and what's yours is one in which you think that, I mean, there's even a self-interested position, right? Maybe you're going to be on the other side of that line. Do you want the person, behind the door that you're knocking at to, shove a gun in your face, take property? Or do you want a society in which everyone can go up to everyone's door, knock on it, and say, I don't have dinner, please help me? Because it might be you. Sodom is a society that's fundamentally broken because it forgets. And it doesn't just forget. It uses all of the resources in its power to make sure it's never you. But the only way to make sure it's never you means that you can't just leave the other person alone. You have to, in some way, violate their rights so that you can protect yours. There's no way to have a society of what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours that's ever able to actually remain neutral. It will always, in some way, have to be violated so that you are never on the end of that line. Or we could have a society like the Amaratzim, in which we recognize things mutate, things are mutable, things change all the time. The world transforms, nothing is stable. You might be on one side of the line, you might be on the other. And you need a society in which whatever position anyone occupies, care is available to them. And then to take the idealistic position, he's saying it's human nature. It's not just material security, it's human nature. And it goes against who we are and what we're supposed to be if we are teaching ourselves to stop being compassionate. He's saying something's fundamentally broken because the neutral position is to be compassionate. The natural thing to do is that when somebody comes before you in a distraught state, the natural thing is to respond compassionately. You actively change yourself to stop feeling that way. Oh, what are they going to do with the money? They're just going to use it on drugs. Right? That's a choice we make to see people who don't have as deserving it, rather than as having whatever. We don't know. We just don't know what's happened. And the truth is, maybe they do. Maybe their state is ultimately due to choices that they made. But who knows? Maybe the state you'll be in is due to choices you'll make. And the question will be, how do you want somebody responding to you? It's not a class on any fancy theory. This is literally just Pirkei Avot. So I think we've explored Sodom pretty sufficiently. As always, there's way more sources than we can cover in our amount of time, but I'll provide the source sheet tomorrow in the kind of summary video post, or I'll just put it in the chat later. It'll be in the link. It'll be in the description of this video if you're watching on YouTube. And apologies for the connection issues. But now I want to kind of end on a happy note. I want to focus on the Chassid, but I think the Chassid will also really, in a way, sharpen what it is we're trying to get at, that we're trying to move away from. We're trying to kill the Sodomite inside of us, right? And the Chassid is the way, I think, the better path forward. But the twist is going to be at the end, and you're going to go like, wow. So, Chasid, says Bartanura, she'ose lifnim mishuras adin. So that Hebrew phrase is taken to mean somebody who goes above and beyond. But interestingly, remember, hey look, shuras, same actual kind of connected word as rishus. Somebody who does not take full advantage of that which is that belongs to them, i.e. for themselves. So if you draw a circle around yourself and you're in the middle of it, that's your rishus, right? That's the circle of your impact. That's the boundary of your property. A chassid is somebody who doesn't go to the full extent of the line. Their radius of what they need for themselves, or what they take for themselves, is x divided by 2, x divided by 3, right? X being the full radius of the circle. Lifni mishuras adin does not mean actually go above and beyond. It actually means seeds ground which you could take advantage of, but leaves it to others. That's what a chassid is. Somebody who sees what is theirs as not really actually being what is theirs, but rather what is available. So I'll bring us back to the Talmud. We have an example. So one of the instances of the cruelty of Sodom is that they would say, okay, somebody who owns an ox, they have, everyone's going to take a turn shepherding the oxes. Okay, they're going to go graze the oxes. Everyone who owns an ox has to do it once. Okay, that seems like a co-op, right? It sounds like a CSA. Okay, you're part of the CSA, you go and you work in the fields every once in a while. Fine. That sounds fair. But everyone who doesn't have an ox has to do it twice. That's the cruelty of Sodom. If you don't have, it's your fault, and you should feel bad about it. And you're going to work harder to make sure that other people get more than you. So there was one rebel, kind of the plotit of his time, who steals all the oxes, slaughters them all, processes the meat, and processes the hides. To everyone who owned an ox, he gives one hide. Yeah, here's the hide of your ox. Congrats, you get a hide. To everyone who didn't have an ox, he gave 2 hides. And they string them up. They're like, what are you doing? How could you do this? He says, just as is the, this is the rule that you made. If you have 1 ox, you shepherd once. If you have 0 oxes, you shepherd twice. So the chassid is not the one who says what's fair is fair. The chassid actually actively tries to repair. Right? The righteous, the generous, the pious. I think chassid, the word really is generous, because chesed means love, means generosity. A gadlut, right? Being magnanimous. The generous, spiritually and materially. I think 1 ox can make more than 1 hide. Yes, I agree. The math doesn't seem to make sense, unless you realize that hides are actually not that big and oxes are huge. I.e., like a processed hide. Think of like a square of a Torah, right? That's a good point. Or Susie's saying, or maybe if you have more than 1 ox, you still just get 1 hide, maybe, and then that kind of gets redistributed to other people. One of the two. Point is that he sees an opportunity to balance the scales. So what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, fundamentally is a wicked way to be, because it will eventually become this. I'm going to actually exploit you if you have nothing and make sure that you serve those who have. Right? It's a theology of the property class. But the rebel here actually sees it as an opportunity to repair. To see that overages, right, excess, surplus, right, is used then to benefit society as a whole. The Tosfos Yontiv take the Derech HaChaim and shorten it down, which is helpful for us. He says, the chassid is not somebody who is mebazbez. Mebazbez doesn't mean scatter. It's a bad translation. It means to disperse. I.e., somebody who basically says, I give up my whole estate, like on your deathbed. Like you say, I donate my entire wealth to the needy in the society. The rabbis say, actually, you're not allowed to give your entire estate all at once. You're only allowed to give 1/5 of it. So the rabbis say you're only allowed to give 1/5 of your estate. Why? Because, are they keeping people from giving? Isn't that what we saw, actually, is casting an evil eye on somebody else's property? No. It says shelo yibadada, so you don't give too much, and you end up then, if something goes wrong, let's say you survive, you don't die on your deathbed, now you have nothing, and now what do you have to do? Now you have to go on the dole. Right now you have to take from other people. So it uses a more immediate, moderate principle of giving to make sure that you don't end up actually then creating a net deficit by then creating one more needy person, i.e. yourself. So then what does it mean to be what's mine is yours and what's yours is yours? Right? That's the principle of the chesed. B'mevater kafi hara'ui irinan. So it's not like to be a chesed means you have to like be like some bodhisattva type person saying property means nothing, I give, take, property is meaningless to me. Rather, it's not saying you have to be like superhuman. It's not saying you have to be a tzaddik. That's maybe what a tzaddik would do. A chassid is maybe a little more accessible. It's somebody who reasonably understands that if they have more than they need, then that surplus needs to go to where it can do the most good. I.e. not just burning a hole in your pocketbook, not just like sitting around in, the Maldives or whatever. It needs to be actually somehow activated, put to use. Right? All this, there's so much wealth in the world right now, and so much of it is doing nothing, because the vast majority of wealth right now is passively generated, not based in income. Right? The most money is coming from having money. That's the key, that's the kernel of Sodom. What's mine is mine, and it's going to keep on making, and what's yours is yours. Sorry, you don't have much. So a chassid is somebody who's able to repair this by realizing that surplus, right, having too much, means that is, in a way, a compelling reason to make sure that it's going to where it can actually do something. In the Midrash Shmuel, quoting Rabbi Yehuda a chassid, I think, when he says a chassid, I think he means Rabbi Yehuda a chassid, the author of Sefer HaChasidim. He might mean somebody else. He might maybe mean Avram Maimoni, the son of Maimonides, or Ovadia Maimoni. Maybe a descendant of Maimonides. I have to look into it, who he means when he says a chassid. But quite fittingly, he quotes somebody who he terms the pious one. It says the pious one writes this. The one who says, what's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours. Who's that? Stone, right? Umaya ase adam, right? What can a person do? V'itrachek mi'amida hara azot. Right? How can you make sure to keep yourself away from this seductively, putatively neutral way of living? Oh, what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, right? It's just, I'm just not involving myself. How can we correct ourselves? How can we intervene and make a change? How can we keep us from sliding into this seductive way of living? He says, Yarbe latate ad yishuv lo teva sheni. It's not about having a nature. It's about making your nature. Give and give and give and give until it becomes your second nature. Literally, teva sheni. That's not figurative translation. Until it becomes your second nature to give. It becomes natural to you. V'da ki siman hanadiv sheyitain b'simcha. And the sign, the proof of a generous person is that they give joyfully, joyously, with happily. I.e., they don't see themselves as being deprived when they give. That's the principle of generosity. Is that when you give, giving is more than the keeping. That's what we need to reprogram in ourselves. There's an anxiety we have, maybe from being, many of us from immigrant families, maybe from a history of insecurity of being a Jew in the world, maybe just what it means to be alive right now and in insecurity in general. And that might all in a way be true. It's reasonable to feel anxious. It's reasonable to feel insecure. But then the question comes to us, what kind of life do we want to be living? What kind of life do we want to be living? Do we want to be living one that generates, or do we want to be living one that maintains? a life that maintains, i.e. what keeps mine, mine, and what's yours, yours, will eventually, this is the argument, devolve. There's no way to maintain without having to eventually either use violence to enforce that maintenance, right? The agents of state power, etc., or your own increasing brutality to make sure that nobody threatens you, or B, or just think of the way your soul becomes more defensive, more scared of other people, more distrusting, more antisocial, or society actually furthers and corrupts and becomes one that specifically takes advantage or punishes those who aren't lucky, who aren't fortunate, right? To maintain a theory of the deserving property class. If you have it, because you deserve it. And if you don't, we're going to keep it that way. The only way to fight that is to fundamentally reprogram our basic relation to property and how we relate to it. What it means to have and what it means to be someone who has. To be someone who has, it means that you have to give. You have to give. But you have, you own, you possess, so that you can give. And not just that, but also, we're not Kantians here. It's not like I give out of a strict sense of duty. We saw before, the Yitzhari says, listen, the wheel of fate turns, it could be you on the breadline. So there's a self-oriented reason to want to make sure we have a strong social safety net, that you want to make sure that people are taking care of each other. But even beyond that, in a more, let's say, values, principle focus, you want to be like that because it's better to be that way. It feels better. And I think back, the twist here, the whoa, wait, the whoa moment is, this is actually, in a way, brings us back to being an Am Haaretz. We used our reason and our intellect to convince ourselves we deserve what we have. We need to actually undo the ways we justify ourselves and get back to the intuition of the Am Haaretz, that we are fundamentally owe something to each other. We are made of each other. I am not myself. You are not you. We are made of each other. I'm not sui generis. I owe everything to everyone who has had an impact on me. Positive or negative, but whatever it is, I wouldn't exist without being buffeted by those forces. To be alive is to be fundamentally grateful, because it is to be fundamentally in debt. And if we are fundamentally in debt, then how could we ever see ourselves as justified in having what we have? The key is to realize that the Am Haaretz perspective is one that is not neutral in its own right. What's mine is yours, what's yours is mine. Yeah, sure, it balances out 50-50. If, I'll get what I need and you get what you need, fine. It's not, because if we go back to the original perspective, the readings of the Am Haaretz from the Rabbeinu Yonah, it is a pro-social perspective that generates joy and generates love. And thus we see that the Midrash Shmuel, the Chassid he's quoting, is actually trying to bring us back to be Am Haaretz. To really be loving and joyous is to be living in a way in which we are fundamentally giving to each other. It's not being some incredible philanthropist. I write these huge checks. It is rather occupying a new kind of position. It is about the way we relate to ourselves and each other. It's not quantity, it's quality. It's not about writing the huge check. It's about seeing what you have as being at the service of others. Giving generates joy because it generates fellow feeling. That's how you get to v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love your neighbor as yourself. Because you see, you could be your neighbor. And in fact, you are your neighbor. Tain harbe pa'amim. Give so many times. V'tikna midasan divus. And actualize, fulfill, make sustainable in you this character of generosity, this trait of generosity. Ad shelo yera levavcha, until which will, your heart will not be aggrieved or insecure. You won't feel like you're deprived. Remember, Sodom didn't give even though it wouldn't impact them at all. The Chassid gives so that when they do, it feels like it doesn't impact you at all. The only impact you get is generosity. Is, what's it called? There's something mindset and a different thing. There's a deficit mindset and there's the, what's the other one? Surplus mindset. Giving in this way means you're always in surplus, because even if, let's say, you're $100, $200, $5,000 poorer, you feel richer. And I don't think it's BS. I don't think it's just like a cute idea. You feel richer because you have a richer life. Because the quality of your life is richer now. Because you are now somebody who activates and actualizes what it means to be connected to other people, fundamentally. So we see that the Chassid is actually, in a way, the intuitive position of what it means to live in society. To be fundamentally, first and foremost, connected to each other, dependent on each other, recognizing that vulnerability is core to what it means to be a human being, to be alive in this world, and to recognize that we are put here and everything we have is to make sure that we and everyone are cared for when it is needed. Yesh koach. Susie, you have a thought?
Well, a lot of what we were talking about today felt very economic. Like when we kept saying resources, like it felt like things that you physically have.
Yeah.
But when you start talking about because it makes you feel good, like, yeah, you can write a check, but that you don't see the results of that. Like, I feel like being able to give your time, being able to actually, like how you volunteered for like the after school program or whatever, like that's the part that makes you feel good. Yeah. And you know what I mean? Like, so are we only talking about economic giving, or we're talking about actually sharing ourselves with other people?
I think both. I think, I say time is money, right? Like the way, us involving ourselves with community activities, volunteering and things like that, being a member of a shul and helping out, knowing your neighbors in your building, knowing your neighbors on your street, making sure that, they know that who you are, and if they need help, that they can come knock on your door, being part of a mutual aid society, whatever it is. Yes, but I think it always is in some way economic. It's always material because time is a resource you have, right? So like that can show up in a lot of different ways. I think one of the ways is, if you want to focus on the experience of it, sure, yeah, go and meet people and be, and practice kindness and practice, presence and care. It's true. But I think also, again, part of it is the way you relate to yourself and what you have. And if that's fundamentally transformed, i.e. when I go to my bank balance or whatever, right, when I look around and see what I own, then I see the ways in which that needs to be positioned to do the most good for the most people. That's also like that fundamentally changes, I think, how we function and who we are, how we are. The word "who" turns into the word "how." You just have to switch a couple of letters around. Okay, big yesh koach, everybody. We're running a little bit late, so I think I'm just going to wrap it up. But I hope I'll see you next week. We'll be having Shabbos. Oh, we're having Parsha Chat Wednesday at 7, and Shabbos service as per usual. I think we'll also hopefully be having a service on Sunday morning because it is the fast of 17th of Tammuz. So if you live in the area, please join. Feel free to reach out to me on my email, which you can find on the Beth Leda website, bethleda.ca. Hope everyone has a wonderful week. Shavua Tov. Yesh koach.